Muses of Mythology is a spoiler-heavy podcast.
That's an understatement.
We're going to discuss not just the events of this book, but the Riordan as a whole, and really anything that we feel is relevant. You can find full spoiler warnings in the show notes. There's a bite. There's a kitty bite on the book.
You little bastards.
Go on. Welcome to Muses of Mythology, a podcast where we explore how ancient myths become part of modern pop culture through the lens of Riordan's Magnus Chase and the gods of Asgard. This is Story 96, The Norn. I'm your co-host and podcasting muse, Darien Smartt. Joining me is my co-host and brother, DJ.
How's everybody doing today? I'm DJ the Muse, and I've been playing a lot of COD Zombies, but I've taken a break today to play some Marvel Rivals. It came out today, and it's just a blast.
So y'all can definitely timestamp this episode.
Yeah, this episode, it's December 5th.
And see how long it took Darien to edit it.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. She got sick.
Let's go muse around the garden for a minute.
It's December.
It is.
It's a new month. We are donating once again, and we are donating to the beloved Toys for Tots Foundation.
Mm-hmm. No, say it the way you said it. Say it the way you said it before we started recording.
Oh, man. You know them. You love them. It's Toys for Tots. They got a box everywhere you fucking go. No, it was everywhere you go, they got a fucking box.
Yep. Yes, they do. And we discussed whether or not we would just go to a store and purchase a Nerf gun for the price.
Just a nice $20 Nerf gun.
Drop it in there. But you can just donate to Toys for Tots online. So we will be doing the standard donation because they will be able to determine exactly where they want that money to go. Cash.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Donating cash.
Liquid cash.
Liquid cash. We currently have 10 patrons over on Patreon, so we will be donating an additional $10 out of pocket, making it around $20.
Nice, clean $20 bill.
It's a new month, and every month we donate $1 for every patron we have over on Patreon to some organization doing a net good in the world. Saying that just on the off chance this is your very first episode, and you're like, why is this happening?
Yep.
Hey, if it's your first episode, thanks for listening to the garden segment. I know most of y'all don't.
Guys, guess what? Muses is coming in a week.
Oh, shoot! Muses!
We got Muses coming in a week.
Here.
I've watched quite a few.
Yep.
You know, I was pleasantly surprised by one of them. I'll say that much.
Interesting. Yeah, DJ's got ahead on the consumption part, and I will be doing that crazy. Yeah, Muses. We'll drop the first episode for everyone on the main feed. Second episode's going to be over on Patreon for everybody who wants to listen over there. And after that, it's only for patrons.
Yes.
But at every tier, however much. Just as a thank you for supporting us this year, all bonus episodes for the month of December are the 12
our 10 episodes of Muses.
It's true.
Are the ones that are paid because there is a free tier for you guys will get episode 2 there.
Yeah, that's what you want. And here's the thing. I know there are quite a few of you over there on Patreon on the free tier. I see the numbers.
Hey, you're going to get a wonderful episode.
You're going to enjoy it. So that's a thank you for you as well for supporting us over there and making our Patreon feel special.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks,
Back
bye.
to the show.
So DJ,
what's up?
You may recall in the last episode we deemed that this would be Fate's Part 2.
Technically, yes.
It's not.
You hate to see it. I assume the Norns, that means that they aren't actually fate gods?
Well, interesting. Interesting you say that, DJ. DJ, I want you to hold in your head this question as we go through. Were the Norse a fatalistic people? You don't have to answer it right now. I just want you to hold it in your head whilst we go. And if you want to make a guess currently, based on, we've talked a lot about various myths.
It seems like. Because, I mean, they have it where everybody kind of knows that, like, Ragnarok is coming and or Ragnarok has already happened, right? So, like, the gods know, so they all accept that fate that's coming to them for the most part. So I imagine their fate gods are much of the same.
Interesting. I had not considered Ragnarok. That is a very good point. So, listeners, you can also hold this question in your head and think about it and whether or not your answer changes over the course of this episode. So, DJ, what do you recall about the Norn in the Magnus Chase books?
They show up.
Yep.
They tell you who your Norse affiliation is. Mm-hmm. And they tell you how you're going to die in Ragnarok.
Yes.
kind of a...
Yes, but even more less than that. They only show up the once, and it's for Magnus.
Oh,
I
that's right.
also misremembered what it is.
That is right. Yeah, the kings.
Yeah.
The whatever the fuck they're called.
The Thanes.
The Thanes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For everyone else, they just throw the runes and read the runes.
The Norn show up specifically for Magnus
to communicate how big and he gets a prophecy. We get a whole ass prophecy with Magnus here. It's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And I will even do a reading. And this is right after this is right after Gunilla tried to sabotage Sam with the altered footage of Magnus on the bridge fighting Surt, where it makes it like obscures his heroic stuff and just highlights the things that were ridiculous, and doesn't show that he died with a weapon in his hand. And so
edited footage.
Very edited footage. And then between the roots of the tree where the waterfall hit the dark lake, a massive bubble erupted. Bloop. On the surface of the water stood 3 women shrouded in white. Except for the crackle of the cooking fire and the sound of the waterfall, the hall was silent. Thousands of warriors watched, frozen in amazement, as the 3 women glided across the floor, heading towards me. Sam, what's going on? The Norns, she said. The Norns themselves have come to read your fate. This is bad. The Norns only show up in extreme cases.
Which means they've shown up before?
Apparently. I don't think we get a sight of the last time the Norns showed up. So the middle Norn, fog collected, solidifying into a half-dozen runestones. She threw them into the air. They floated above her, each rune expanding into a luminous white symbol as big as a poster board. That's how we get the rune of Frey. And so that's how we know his parentage. And then they give a full-ass prophecy. Wrongly chosen, wrongly slain. A hero Valhalla cannot contain. 9 days hence the sun must go east, ere the sword of summer unbinds the beast.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And then Sam's like, wait, I couldn't have made a mistake because I was promised.
Yeah.
And then we see Sam gets fired, but they're like, well, Magnus is here now.
Him.
Yep.
Come to find out it was Odin.
It was Odin himself. Odin.
Odinson.
I can't believe it's the first time we've done that. Yeah, so Sam gets fired, but Magnus is here, so whatever. I guess you're here now. And then they'll decide to ignore that prophecy.
Stuck here, dude. Like,
yeah, we're not going to do anything about that prophecy. Don't do anything. Whatever.
Yeah, we don't want the sword to go east.
Yeah.
Because it'll for surely free the beast.
And so that is the entirety of the Norn.
Yeah.
Unless somebody can remember another time they showed up, but I pretty sure that's it for the Norn.
Yeah, couldn't tell you.
So I've got, you can see, DJ.
You had a lot of references of the Norn.
A lot of references of the Norn. And we're going to start where we start 99% of the time.
The Gilfeningning? How did I pronounce that wrong? The Gilfeningning?
No, I'm laughing because you are right. When we start with Snorri, it's the Gilfeningning. When we start with the Poetic Eddas, it's the Volspa, the Seer's Prophecy. And so we get a mention of the Aesir, essentially. Just this first, I'm going to read you 2 verses here.
Okay.
The Aesir met on Idavall Plain. High they built altars and temples. They set up their forges, smithed precious things, shaped tongs, and made tools. They played checkers in the meadow. They were merry. They did not lack for gold at all, until 3 ogre girls came, all-powerful women out of Giant Land.
Are the Norn the ogre girls?
So, that's why we read first, because it's like, what does that mean? And so, we're going to go to the footnotes of, again, this is the Caroline Larrington is the translation we use, and her specific note on this of the 3 ogre girls. Who these girls might be is not clear. They seem to be inimical? I've never seen, hold on, what is this word? I skimmed over it.
Inimical? Inimical?
Inimical. Yeah. I don't know. They seem to be inimical to the gods, and their appearance marks the end of the Golden Age. Some critics have identified them as the Fates, who appear in verse 20. And let me bring us to verse 20 then. Actually, I'm going to start at verse 19. An ash I know that stands, Yggdrasil it's called, a tall tree drenched in shining loam. From there the dews fall into the valley. Green it stands always over Erd's well. From there come girls, knowing a great deal. 3 from the lake, standing under the tree. Erd is called one, Verdandi another. They carved a wooden ship, Skuld the third. They laid down laws, they chose lives for the sons of men, the fates of men.
Nice.
So, it's these 3 women come. They're giantesses, essentially the ogre girls. And again, it says, as Larrington notes, some scholars have identified them as being the Norn. Not all.
Not all.
But
some of them. 3
being very powerful. And also, for whatever reason, their arrival, as you said, it ends the golden age of the gods. Like, everything was super chill. They had everything they needed. They were just playing checkers in the meadow.
Yeah, but then these guys showed up and ruined the party.
And then the Fates showed up. Oh, yeah, they showed up. Perhaps the Norn showed up.
Yeah.
Knowing the end of all things, knowing the fates for all sons of men. And you got to ask, why would that put an end to the golden age of the gods?
Because suddenly they're bound by fate.
Suddenly they're bound by fate, perhaps. Or, like, I think the thing you mentioned earlier, DJ, suddenly they know about Ragnarok. And things don't seem quite so fun anymore. Yeah. So now, usually I go through all of one Edda before jumping to the other. But for the sake of, I think, the most coherent way to relay the information about the Norn and kind of build this episode, I will be jumping over to the Gylfaginning now.
All right.
And giving us a little bit of Snorri's not abbreviation, but presentation, thank you, of the Norn. So it is, a handsome hall stands under the ash tree beside the well. Out of this hall comes 3 maidens who are called Erd, fates, Verdandi, becoming, and Skuld, obligation. These maidens have shaped men's lives. We call them the Norns.
Nice.
Very straightforward. It is classic story. It is exactly what we have in the other poem, but just, a little bit
sweetened up
a little bit more. Yeah. So we have the Norn. We know they come, they have like the fates and stuff, but they are also in both cases associated with this well at the base of Yggdrasil. So I want to elaborate on that a little bit.
It's Mimir's well.
It's interesting because I thought so too.
I mean, it's not. Mimir's well is in Jotunheim.
Yes, that one's somewhere else. This one is actually called Erdswell, who's the name of one of the Norn. And I just keep saying Erd, but I've also seen it like it was supposed to be like, or weird.
I looked up how to pronounce all these names, and
nice.
Yurth was one I remember.
Yurth sounds better. I'll do that. Yeah, it's the problem of them being the English characters and us trying to pronounce it. And
even those Scandinavian characters.
Yeah, sometimes it's
some of those are a little funky, and I'm like,
I don't know. I'm sorry.
We don't use this shit. But Jorn, are you kidding me?
Bjorn. So in the next chapter, which focuses specifically on Yggdrasil, we have a little bit more on the Norn and their connection with Yggdrasil. And it goes, it is also said that those Norns who live beside Yurth's well draw water every day from the spring, and that they splash this, mixed with mud that lies beside the well, over the ash so that its branches do not wither or decay. The water is so sacred that all things which come into the spring become as white as membrane called skal, skin.
Because it's like, it's like you are and then that D with the thing, right?
Yes, but the D doesn't usually have the thing here. But I've seen it with the thing.
With the thing, it's like somewhere between the D and the th sound. So it's Yurth.
Yurth.
Nice. Some shit like that, yeah.
So yeah, it becomes as white as the membrane inside an eggshell.
Nice.
Yeah, so this connection of the Norn, not just to the fates and knowing the fate of all living beings, but also as caretakers of the world tree. Which I liked that a lot. I had not known about that connection between them, not just as beings who live there, but as like caretakers of it. And I found a passage written by scholar Karen Beck-Pedersen, who has written extensively on the Norn. Like, I'm going to reference her a lot in this episode because she's written a whole book on the Norns, and it's called The Norns in Old Norse Mythology. Let me say, if I could have properly gotten my hands on, if I'd known about this book in advance, I would have probably bought it. Because it's a textbook. It's like a 300-page thing. I could not just find it online to be able to peruse.
It's a whole.
It was like, you got to reach out to some libraries to try to get this thing gotten to you. But I fortunately was able to find some places where I could read a few passages and was able to identify elements that would help in this episode. And I'm sure if I'd gotten my hands on it, there was so much more depth we could have dived into, but this is where we work with.
Yeah.
So, to quote her, and specifically how she identified the connection or interpreted the connection between the Norn and Yggdrasil, especially how Snorri presents it. Snorri describes the Norn as nurturing the tree of life, Yggdrasil, and the same is implied in Volspa 19, although there the Norn are not said to be actively tending the tree. Although this active portrayal of the Norn may simply be Snorri's attempt to explain why Yggdrasil is said to be watered in white silts in Volspa 19, it serves to indicate their motherly, life-sustaining aspect, furthering life and ensuring its continued growth. Nourishing the roots of the tree is an image that conveys rather well the power and importance of these underground women. Life depends on them.
Nice.
It's
beautiful.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool connection I wanted to highlight because I think it is a distinct difference between the Norn and the Fates in Greek mythology, where we have the concept of like the Fates and they spin the wheel and they spin the course of their life. But the element of the Norn caring for the world tree and life relying on them is something that I felt was distinct to the way the Norn are portrayed. I would not necessarily say the Fates are ever given that same kind of
deference,
nurturing.
Yeah.
Like feeling as if the Fates support the life. It feels like more often than not, the Fates are just ensnaring it
just
or binding it. Yeah. Or they're dictating it. This like component of building from, life springing from, caring it, nurturing it, feels more compassionate in a sense than I feel like the Greek Fates often ever portrayed as.
Yeah.
One last thing that I wanted to, not one last thing, there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but one last thing for this initial introduction of the Norns is this element of Skuld, who I actually mentioned in the last episode. And I don't know how I missed this pretty major detail in the last episode where we talked about the Valkyries, but I did. How very silly of me.
Which one of these tabs?
Which one? Which book? Which tag? So let me just read this passage for
refresher.
And this is again from the Gylfaginning.
Yep.
This is from the chapter Valkyries and Goddesses.
Yep.
These women are called Valkyries. They are sent by Odin to every battle where they choose which men to die and they determine who has the victory. Gun and Rhoda and the youngest Norn, named Skuld, always ride to choose the slain and decide the outcome of the battle.
She works 2 jobs.
This woman. So somehow I missed the fact that Snorri says one of the Valkyries is also one of the Norns.
Yeah.
Massive oversight on my part. I apologize. That's huge. Now I would love to deliver more information and tell you what the scholars think of that, but like weirdly, it's just, and the sources I could find to pull from mentioned.
He's like, Norn was also a Valkyrie.
But I couldn't find any writings on scholars who spent time reflecting.
He's like, what does this mean?
I'm sure Beck Pedersen has, but I just unfortunately didn't
mean
have
again?
You know what? That's a great question, DJ, because I did want to look it up and see what did I say that Skuld meant.
Was that one obligation?
No. What was that? I actually was like trying to remember. I'm like, wait, which one did that mean? Because they all meant something. We talked about it. Debt or future.
Yeah.
Yep, there it is. Okay. That's interesting. And I'm like, what does it say that? And again, this is a Snorri thing. It's not cited anywhere else, so we don't know where he's pulling this from. And then there was some thought that the Norn and then the Valkyries are all just like remnants of this one type of female spirit. But I also found some other scholars arguing that that's not the case, and that's just a widespread misinterpretation of it. And I don't know enough about this argument to chime in either way, but I thought it was interesting because I found that a lot in the different female spirits or female like figures. They're like, oh, they're just a more complex version of, or they're a later version of this idea. And this is the first time I've encountered the fact that some scholars are like, No, that's
No,
not
it's
it.
just not. It's just not true.
That's
These
not
people are crazy.
it. Yeah, they're not, no. So, but DJ, you hit exactly on the next thing I actually wanted to talk about, which is what their names mean.
Awesome.
So, Earth, and
Maybe
Verdandi are from an old Norse word that means to become. Essentially, for Earth, it could be like the quote, that which became or happened, whereas Verdandi is more of a present tense, that which is happening, which makes Skuld
that which ought to be.
Yep, need or shall be or ought to be, or which should become or what needs to occur.
So our 3 Christmas spirits. Yet to come.
You could conceivably do a Norse take on it in which the Norns play the Christmas spirits.
I see.
Wow, look at that tie-in. Muses coming in latter days.
You better believe it. It's great.
So, there are some translations that say, oh, it means past, present, and future. But a number of scholars have argued against this chronological interpretation. And essentially saying that, cementing them as if they are meant to establish elements of time is a complete misunderstanding of the Norse relationship to these figures. And so we find this in a couple sources. So first I want to tell you about the Nordic Family Book.
Okay.
Which, DJ, this is a Swedish encyclopedia. Published between 1876 and 1993.
Nice.
The whole version is available digitally online now.
Oh, wonderful.
They have an entry for Norn, obviously, and I'm going to read you the part where it talks about the 3 Norns' names specifically. The name Earth is used in the sense of misfortune, of which it is a personification, and belongs together with Verdandi, which is the verb bruda and became, like debt to school. The names thus allude to the future, which fate's decision must refer to, and there is no... Wait. What? Hold on, what is the sentence? Names that allude to the future, which fate's... Okay.
It's a translation. Be patient, everybody.
The names thus allude to the future, which fate's decision must refer to, and there is no support in either matter or name for mindless division, that Erd would also be the Norma of past, Verdandi of present, and Skuld only of the future. So the line I want to underline is, that was, again, weird because it is, again, translating like 19th century Swedish into English for me.
It's a little struggle bus.
But that underline of that, it's not mindless division. Like, it specifically is like, it does not mean that Erd means of the past and Verdandi is only the present and Skuld is only of the future. Like,
a little more of a Venn diagram, if you will.
Kind of. For Beck Patterson also gets her hand on the ball here. It's essentially she also argues that the names do not stand for past, present, and future. Earth and Skuld are older names with a far broader range of connotations, where Verdandi seems to be a, quote, ad hoc invention formulated precisely to complete the chronological sequence, and it's not actually very old. So there's also an argument that Verdandi was added later to make a connection of these two where there perhaps wouldn't be, which wouldn't be unusual because there are times where it's like, why do we
care about a god for the present?
Yeah. Why does the eagle have a name and not the falcon?
Yeah.
Right. And all of that is very interesting. But I was having the hardest time gaining a clear understanding of what that actually was saying. And so I want to point to mythologist and author Henning Kjær, because I read about his interpretation of this, and I think it was most concise in articulating what the Norn's names were perhaps intended to represent.
Yeah.
So rather than being a connotation with time, it's more about the context of should, right? And kind of the obligation of something, right? Like, Erd can mean fate and death.
Yeah.
Whereas Verdandi is like things that are in being almost like birthing and stuff. And the skull is specifically like that idea of future, and debt is more just like what you should do, what someone ought to do. What is their responsibility to do in a given situation? And so it's not moments in time. It's not chronological. It is a state of being separate from just an existence at a certain date, right? Like if we have the concept of like fate and death and then becoming beginning with the other two, and that could almost feel like, yeah, beginning and end. But with, I really want to emphasize like the concept of should and skull not necessarily being like what will happen,
but what should happen.
What should happen. And the idea of what should happen comes with a lot of cultural context and expectation, because when we say this should be how things are done, this is how you expect things to be done, that
it's very much so like a subjective thing too, compared to where you are in like the world or your life, right?
So yeah, if you say like what should I do in a given situation, that's layers a lot on the overall expectations and requirements.
There's a lot of normativity.
Yes, exactly. Like you are expected to behave in a certain thing. And if we tie that to the Norn, to this concept of these are the beings of fate, they weave together like your men's lives. And the idea that what we should do is part of that, that makes that normativity, gives it a sense of like deeper inherent. Like this isn't just we say it because we say it. We say it because if you behave as you should, that is the right and orderly way for one to exist.
Yeah.
And I felt that was very interesting, being able to I think, because again, talking about the fates in Greek mythology, where their names translate specifically to like the one who spins, the one who cuts, right? The one who measures. Those ones are very much like inherent to like this space of life, and they feel like very defined. Whereas the Norns are likely not meant to be quite that defined, and a little bit more of like abstract elements
more open to interpretation of these time things.
Yes. So I want to go back to the Poetic Edda, and we're going to jump into another poem that I think you're going to find very interesting, DJ.
All right.
So this is the first poem of Helgi Hundensbani.
Okay.
And it starts with his birth. It was at the start of time that the eagle shrieked. The sacred waters poured from him and fell. Then Helgi, the strong-minded man, was born to Broghild in Bralund. Night fell on the estate, and then came the Norns, those who shaped fate for the prince. They said that the war leader should be the most famous and that he'd appear the best of princes. They plied very strongly the strand of fate, and as the strongholds were breaking in Bralund, they prepared the golden threads and fastened it in the middle under the moon's hall. And it goes on a little longer, but they showed up when this incredible, important prince, this hero, was born. But DJ...
Oh, it was Helgi.
That was Helgi, right? That's the guy. What if I told you that it's not just because he was a big, important prince that they showed up at Helgi's birth? What if I told you that the Norns show up at every birth?
Hey.
Yeah.
The Norns just always there. They are in that operating room with you.
Yeah.
You don't know. You don't see them, but they are there.
And so it literally says, there are yet more Norns, those who come to each person at birth to decide the length of one's life, and they are related to the gods.
They just roll like a D100.
Yeah. What's going to happen? We'll see.
It's lightly weighted to like higher, ages, but one.
So, Norns show up. Not just for a big hero, but for everyone. Mm-hmm. And did you catch what I said there? That there are more Norns.
Yes.
Because DJ, it's not just the three. If I may read the rest of that sentence. So it said, and these are related to the gods. Others are descended from the elves. A third group comes from the dwarves, as it is said here. And then we have a verse from the Lay of Fafnir that I'm going to bounce over to real quick because I prefer to keep my translations consistent. In Lay of Fafnir, Sigurd has just slain the dragon Fafnir. And Fafnir conjures the Norn, and he says to him,
"You said I would live this long."
Essentially, he says, the Fafnir is dying, the Norn's judgment will get you in the sight of land and the fate of a fool. You'll drown in the water even if you row in a breeze. All is dangerous for the doomed man. Essentially saying you'll get close to home, but you'll drown with land in sight. And he's just saying, this isn't how Sigurd dies.
Yeah,
So
drowning close to home.
But since he mentioned the Norn, Sigurd said, "Tell me, Fafnir, you are said to be wise and to know a great deal. Which are these Norns who go to help those in need and bring children forth from their mothers?" Fafnir said, "From the very different tribes I think the Norns come. They are not all of the same kin. Some spring of the Aesir, some from the elves, and some of the daughters of Davlin, which are the dwarves."
Nice.
And again, that's super interesting that there are tons of different Norns, and they come from different lineages to be the beings. And it feels like a Valkyrie gig, almost. We have the Valkyries, who are the ones that, for Odin, ride to the battlefield and decide the men who, when they die, will come to Valhalla.
But they look at the babies and decide how long they live.
How long they live, or what their fate will be, or what there is. Yeah, basically that, what it'll be made up of.
Instead of grabbing a guy who's at the end of his life, they predict the life of a newborn child.
Yeah.
Nubile babies.
Babies. And so that was also super interesting, how we have the Norn, who there's a ton of different ones, not just our big three, but the big three are the ones that get names, but then there's a ton, and they all show up for everybody, not just a big old hero.
Nice.
Which makes it very interesting that we decided that the Norn were only going to show up for Magnus, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, weird.
And it does feel, if you recall the first Percy Jackson book, how Percy literally sees the Fates sewing a giant sock.
Yeah.
It does feel very much like we are using the Norn in the same way Rick used the Greek Fates and the Oracle of Delphi.
It could very well be. He is not a scholar in Norse mythology.
No, he's not. And that's okay. That's not what we critique for. We critique him for picking the worst sources to use to build your summer Valkyrie goddess off of, you bastard.
Yeah, you definitely could have done that one a little better there, bud.
So I thought that was very interesting, where it feels like, I mean, he already dropped the ball in giving us interesting Valkyrie stuff, so why would I expect us to be creative with, like, what if we had a Norn character?
Yeah, just the Norn chilling.
Yeah, just this Norn.
Like, you got picked to be a Valkyrie. I got picked to be a Norn.
I'm a Norn. What does that mean? I don't know. And
I
look
at babies all day, dude.
Yeah.
I look at babies, and there's this fucking tally counter that I push as many times as I want for this baby.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
Right in front of the baby.
Or if instead of reading the runes, it is like a Norn who is present, who is the one doing it. And then when the big three Norns show up to read Magnus's, it's like, oh.
The big three named ones.
Oh, they're the caretakers of the well. They don't usually show up for just anybody. That one, I feel like, okay, we can have that. But like, I don't know, it would have been cool if we had like a Norn character who was hanging out, and they sometimes they may have been a little bit too close to like Rachel Elizabeth Dare. So we will say this. Prophecies? That doesn't seem to really be a thing.
It's not much of a Norse thing. The closest we get to prophecies really is just Ragnarok.
Ragnarok is going to happen, and that's not a prophecy. That's a fact.
Yeah, it's just Ragnarok's going to happen.
And that's
Magnus Modai live.
Yep, and you don't even have to know, like, there's no room for interpretation. There's no, like, oh, the sun will go east. Like, no.
Three big chickens crow.
Yep, Odin's going to get eaten by a wolf. Loki and Heimdall are going to kill each other.
Thor kills Jormungandr, but then succumbs to his poison.
After 9 steps.
Yep.
And then, but it's okay. Baldur's going to come back with his Baldur and Han will come back at the end, and everything will be fine.
Baldur's big chillin'.
Powder's big chillin'. No. So yeah, that's not like a prophecy. That's just a straight fact, and we have all the details.
Yeah.
So we go over when the Nords are mentioned, and they're mentioned a lot. Usually, though, not as a specific character doing an action.
Yeah.
Those examples I have given to you already. The times when they are other times mentioned is usually they're just being, it's a mythic figure citing the Norns as being responsible for some dreadful things they have done or must do.
Curse you, Norns. Why did you make me slaughter that orphanage?
Essentially. So if we want to skip back to, well, not skip back, we're going to go to the second poem of Helgi Hundinsbani. So we have Sigrun, who is the Valkyrie that Helgi is in love with, who, as we talked about in the last episode, she was put in, she's like engaged to a man she is deemed not worthy of her.
Yep.
So Helgi rides up and goes to battle. So when she sees him, she runs to greet him.
Yeah.
And Helgi has to deliver some bad news. It was not all good fortune for you, strange creature, though I reckon the Norns had some part in it. This morning at Frankenstein, Bragi and Hogni were killed. I was their slayer. This is Sigrun's dad and brother.
Shh.
Because they were on opposing sides of this conflict.
You hate to see it.
Then we have the site like the Norns spirit woman who determined fate. He also calls her strange creature, which is the term used for Vold's swan maiden wife and her sisters in the poem of Vold, which I think is what I mentioned with
the swan maiden stuff.
So I didn't clock that the previous time. It's another interesting Valkyrie thing. But yeah, so he mentions how this bad thing happened. The Norns were a part of it, but he was the one that killed them. Another time we'll see the Norns referenced in this manner is in the Lay of Riordan. And this is the one where Loki is sent to go find a bunch of treasure to pay back a king who was keeping the Aesir prisoner because they killed an otter who turned out to be the king's son.
Okay.
So Loki's like, well, I've heard of this shape-shifting dwarf that has like a shit ton of treasure and like a cursed ass ring. So I think I'm going to go do that. So he does.
Yeah.
So this is the start of the poem with Loki has captured our fish friend. And Darvi is talking to him. What sort of fish is that which courses through the water and doesn't know how to avoid danger? Your head can save from hell and find the serpent's flame for me. Essentially being like, hey, I'm going to kill you unless you tell me where the dragon treasure is. And Vari is my name, Oin was my father's name. I've swum through many a fall, a wretched Norn shaped my fate in the early days, that I must wade in water. And so again, we have another side of like, yeah, this thing happened to me, but it's the Norn's fault. Did you remember Andvari and the shit he pulled?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
He's a bastard.
Yeah.
Great bastard.
Yeah. So, kind of have another side of someone being like, yeah, the Norn did this. And I'm like, you are in this situation based on your own choices.
You're a right bastard, bud.
Like, it's interesting. And so then we have several other instances of this. And I'm not going to read you all of the verses of those ones because I don't think that will be particularly interesting for you, for me, or for the audience.
Yeah.
But I do want to give you an oversight of this because they're fascinatingly connected to each other. And so it's the Norns being invoked to reference someone's misfortune, specifically the misfortune that has come about based on this character's own actions.
Yeah.
So in the short lay of Sigrund, the Valkyrie Brunhild blames the Norn for her love of Sigrund, who is married at this time, by the way.
Yeah.
And the wetting of Gundren cites the Norn's wrath after she has killed her husband and her sons in vengeance for them killing, I think, Sigurd's brother after Sigurd's brother killed. Basically, she's like, oh, this horrible thing.
Cycle of violence.
Yeah. And the lay of Hamdir, Gundren's son, Sorli, went to avenge his sister's death. Now he faces death himself at the hands of the king who, he was going to go fight, and remarks on the cruel nature of the Norns. So all three of these examples are and there's a couple more that are in between these that I just found a little less like strong, but all of them are essentially leading one into the next. Each are a direct result of the character bemoaning the situation they are in. That is the result of them taking action in response to another character's actions. And so the other thing about that, though, is that their responses we can interpret as actually being reasonable in the scope of Norse culture. Well, not Brunhild. Not what she did. We're not supposed to think
she's a little crazy.
Her whole thing was reasonable. Like we're not like marries Sigurd's brother and decides so she gets Sigurd killed and then takes her own life. That's a whole thing. We aren't supposed to think that that's up and up. Although we did talk about her on the Hell episode and how she just goes to hell to be with Sigurd again, and it's like, okay.
All right. Weirdo.
I guess I have no comment on that. I don't know how to interpret that. I don't have the cultural context. But so she does that, which results in these other dudes doing this other thing, which would have been like that. Well, we have to do this now because honor and justice and a blood debt. And then Gudrun does something because she was the sister of the man that they killed, so she avenges him by killing them. And that sucks, but that was what she had to do. That's what she should do. And now when the son is bemoaning the fact that he's in the situation, it's because he went to avenge his sister, and now this is not going well for him. Not because he was wrong to go avenge his sister, just because this dude ended up being way higher level than he was prepared for, essentially. And I think that is another marker that indicates the difference between the Norn and the Greek fates. Because when you'll have instance of someone bemoaning what the fates have done and how the cruel fates have set it up, it is often because, yes, sometimes they have made choices that got them into this mess.
But this mess was lined up so crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, how could you ever actually think something like this would happen? Specifically, like, how could Oedipus ever known he killed his father to marry his mother when he was like an orphan? As the fate said he would. As the fate said he would. And it's like...
And it's like...
It's like a crazy setup.
Yeah, because he was not acting with all of the information. There's a layer of dramatic irony where the audience knows more than the character does. Or like... I'm sure Odysseus bemoans the fates for like his long journey. And it's not Odysseus's fault. Like, some of the things he made some choices,
it's like,
but
there's a reason.
But he truly is the plaything of the gods in this element.
This man was blown all over the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah. And even when he does the things that you would argue is like, that was the correct thing to do, it still just doesn't fucking work out for him.
No, you cannot believe that his fucking, crew.
Yeah.
Open that fucking bag.
Yeah, damn it.
They were right there.
Or ate the horses or the cows. For Helios, you didn't have to. I also would have let Poseidon kill you while I'm done. I tried real hard.
Fuck you guys.
Y'all
Are
made
you
this
kidding
so much
me?
harder. So it's like there is a distinct difference where it's like in Greek, it's like, the fates have set things up that you could not have and also they never have all the information.
No.
Whereas it feels like with these characters in Norse mythology,
they're acting with all the information, but they just don't understand where it's actually.
In the case of Brunhild, she did do some shady shit, and not everybody had all the facts. But all the other ones following her were like, they didn't know why this happened, but they did know these are the things that happened, and now I have to respond to that. These are the things that happened, and now I respond to that, and now things suck for me because I responded to this in a way that I had to.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the concept of ought to, should, and did. And I did that. And that was the thing I had to do. But now I am in misery. And now it's like the Norns have crafted this fate to me. Yeah. What else could I have done but followed this fate? Because it is what I should have done.
Yeah.
And I think that also is like, does that make sense? Am I making sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay. I realize the words coming out of my mouth. And I'm like
it's a little, but it's also like.
DJ did a hand motion there
because it's like a little twisty turny, but it's specifically like, hey, this situation you're in, the way that you're supposed to respond, like if I was, I don't know, if somebody like had pushed me in the store, the way I'm supposed to respond is, who gives a shit? I don't fucking care.
You keep walking.
Right? That's for me. It's like, I don't give a shit. Fuck off. And then that would be the Norn of ought to be. You ought to respond like you don't give a fuck. You walk away.
Yeah.
And then whatever comes after is due to the Norn of that.
Yeah. Exactly. Whereas if you're in a culture if someone bumps you, you should turn
back.
around and fight back. And then all of a sudden this person turns out to be like
a jujitsu master,
Jiu-jitsu
bro, and you're like, oh, fuck.
And it's like,
you
that sucks for
cocksuckers,
you,
dude.
but you still did what was perceived as being the thing you should have done.
Yeah.
And I think that's yeah, exactly. That's a great, thank you, DJ. I was like, am I making sense? I don't know. We're getting a little esoteric.
The consequences of your actions, but you did exactly what you were supposed to get here.
Yes, like this is the consequences of your own actions. And when they say like, oh, this is like this is the path the Norn set out for me, it does not read to me as if they are blaming some other mythical divine entity for their suffering.
Yeah.
In the same way that you would feel
you would
like
blame the fates.
cursing the
like,
fates.
these cocksuckers, dude.
What has happened
they
to you
actually
this
are like, what the hell?
It's like, this is the path that the Norns
trying my best here, guy.
Yeah, this is the path that a Norn put out for me, and I could only do this.
Yeah.
But I still chose all these things and had all the information. Let's remember. So it's like, I think I like the way they put it. It was always their choice to take action with the information they had. Like they did make informed decisions based on cultural expectations that got them there. And so with all of that in mind, what do we understand about the Norse concept of fate via their beliefs about the Norn? Circling back, do we view the Norse as being fatalistic? In perhaps the same way we would interpret ancient Greece.
Not the same way we interpret ancient Greece, but that is probably due to that fact of the fates being what's going to happen versus what ought to happen.
Yes. Yeah. I think so too. We have, again, Beck Patterson has an interesting, I didn't get to read this section of her, but I got to read Caroline Larrington's review of her book.
Okay.
So we're a couple layers out.
Yeah, we're a little removed.
But the way she identifies it, the brief conclusion draws the book's findings neatly together, emphasizing the prevalence of the concept of fate in Old Norse by no means characterizes its culture or its heroes as fatalistic. The invocation of the Norse when a hero finds himself facing difficult choices in matters of personal reputation tends to occlude for the speaker, if not for the audience, the cultural imperatives of face and vengeance. So as we're saying, you have to do this to save face and you have to seek vengeance because that is
that's how you save face.
That's how you save face. It is the result of personal choice. Again, the cultural expectation. And I really liked how author N.H. Kerr worded it. Fate does not indicate absolute predetermination, but rather the potential in each life. So when the Nords come and they're putting together what a life is, perhaps it is not meant to understand, like they are not weaving the tapestry of every little detail, every little moment, every little story, but they have this is the potential of what could become with you if you do as you should and you ought to. We know at the start, we know how things you brought into being, there will be a death. And in between that is potential, is what is culturally expected, is what other beings around you will respond to, and how you're expected to respond in turn.
Mm-hmm. It's really neat.
It's really neat. And that's why it was
fun
really
way to view fate.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I don't feel like Fate 2.0 is correct. It's more of a Fate reboot.
So that actually it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we jump into pop culture?
Please, DJ, lead the way.
So this is just me to get a little redemption on our last episode because I remembered a topic that I really wanted to bring up. It's a game called the Kingdoms of Amalur.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an RPG game, and it's specifically the story is based around fate, right? I
like that.
Your character dies at the start of the game and ends up in this thing called, I think, the Well of the Living or the Well of the Dead. Maybe the Well of Souls. Mm-hmm. Can't quite remember. But your character comes back alive, and then you get to choose 3 different choices for the way you want to go, which is Warrior, Rogue Ranger, Mage.
Cool.
in this game, your character specifically no longer has a tapestry of fate.
Yes. Oh my God. I remember this. Yeah. When you, that's so, yes. Our listeners don't know this, but there was one version of the show where we were going to do a list of all the things we wanted to talk about pop culturally and then revisit it at the end of the season. And we just never did this.
Never got around to it.
But literally, this is something DJ told me about years ago after we recorded this episode. He's like, oh, I forgot this really cool thing.
Because it's a fantastic game. Mm-hmm. So much fun. The RPG elements are really killer. One of the DLCs, you can get a manor and married. It's
nice.
Awesome. But in the game, there are these like people, they have just like the role is called a fate weaver. Uh-huh. They don't weave fate, but they read your fate.
Yeah.
They can see like your tapestry of fate and what you're destined to do and when it ends and like that. Mm-hmm. So when you come in contact with the first one, he's like, where is it?
Oh.
It's gone. What do you like? What's going on here? Well, you got to figure this out. And so you kind of do shenanigans. Yeah, like fate stuff. It's really funny. You keep interrupting fate, which is really funny because you do not have a fate no more. You are disconnected from the system.
Yeah.
So you're going around fucking with everybody else's fate. There's a Fae court. There's the two sides. I can't remember what they were called. Maybe like court of night, court of day. Standard.
Yeah.
And they are constantly pretty much replaying missions on loop. Where these guys know that they're going into a battle they're going to die in against the court of night and the court, like vice versa. They're constantly in a loop that's like thousands of years long.
Yeah.
And they've redone it thousands of times at this point. They just know they're going to die. They know they're going to come back. Your character steps in and is like, well, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here now. What are you going to do?
And he cuts it. He stops it. The loop stops. And the one guy who's supposed to ask, like, what the... This wasn't supposed to happen.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
And it's I think one of the first ones you do it to is a guy who had said, when I get back, I'm like propose to the love of my life.
Yeah.
And you save him from dying.
Aww.
He was destined to die. You save him. It's great. And then the later on in the game, you actually fight like an ogre. That is again fated to kill the Fate Weaver from the start of the game.
Yeah.
You save him. It's like, you just saved my life. I was supposed to die. I'm going to stick next to you because I don't know what's going on anymore. This is great.
This is wild. What happens to their fates once you intervene?
It's open.
It's just, interesting.
They no longer have the tapestry of fate.
Oh, I was wondering. Yeah, okay.
It's really cool. Big fan of the game. It had a remake around the time that we did our episode. I just never got around to playing it. But it is one of my favorite RPG games.
Nice.
Super fun. Big fan.
That sounds really cool. I like that concept a lot. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Surprise, surprise, don't have a lot of examples of the Norn specifically.
Well, crazy.
But I got two from media that I have personally engaged with.
Oh, nice.
There were lots of there was like a couple anime ones or a couple other references, but and also like God of War. Obviously, the Norns roll up in that one, and I did a brief skim, and I'm like, I don't find this one interesting enough to deep dive into the way I was like, we haven't played this game, but I want to talk about the Valkyries.
Yeah.
So, first, we've got Wicked and Divine, which is a comic series by Kieran Gillen, which I was a huge fan of and never actually finished, but I need to, where the premise, and I've talked about this one, it's been a long time since I've talked about Wicked and Divine.
Yeah, I got her to talk about it during our Dionysus episode when she forgot.
Oh, yeah, I did forget. I think that's the last time I talked about Wicked and Divine. Basically, the premise is there's this cycle called the recurrence. Every 90 years, 12 young people are essentially the reincarnations of some deities of some sort. There's repeats, but it's always a different lineup. Yeah. And they're like...
Maybe it was in our Persephone episode.
I think I did, because she's in that one too.
Episode, yeah.
And so they are incredibly powerful. They have godlike abilities, typically embraced. In this one, it's like 2010, so they're very pop stars. But in 2 years, they're all dead. They just burn out, essentially. And so you have this one character who is a reporter, and she is like, this is all bullshit. Like, I don't believe that this is real. This is nah. And so she is around a lot, just trying to like figure out like what's really going on. Anyway, she turns out to be one of the Norn.
Oh, nice.
So she rolls up and she's, I think it's Earth, and then she's got her like assistant or her photographer, and like her assistant or her like camera gal or something, but they're the other two. So the three of them are the Norn, and they make up the 12th god of the pantheon. And that's roughly when I fell off. Now, did I in fact go through the Wicked and Divine wiki and read the entire character synopsis and also everything that happens? Yeah. So I finally know how Wicked and Divine is. I absolutely do want to finish it. I was really close. But that's cool. Even with the Norn ability, they're still a little bit like, I don't believe this is on the up and up. Okay, I maybe am a god now, but I'm not. I'm convinced there's still more to this. I have these crazy powers, but I'm still not absolutely. But
you could be smoke and mirrors, dude. Like
their scene where her name was Cassandra. Her name was Cassandra, and she was a Norn. Is very good.
Nice.
But the scene where she is awakened is pretty sweet when she's confronting Arachne, who is like the keeper, like this old woman who's like the keeper of all of them, and she's like confronting her, and she's like, "Oh, but I've been waiting for you." And then she like comes, and she's like in the Norn form, and she's like, "And do you know who they are?" And she's like, "Oh yes, they're Vidani and Skuld." And they're like, it was really weird, but like in the best way.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool. And then the second one I have for y'all is American Gods.
Nice.
And yes, fuck Neil Gaiman. But I do want to talk about American Gods briefly because the Norns are pretty interesting here. And so they are never precisely named as the Norn because Shadow doesn't know. She's the protagonist, Shadow. He doesn't know that's what they are.
But that's what they are.
But that's what they are, right? He's running around with Mr. Wednesday, who is Odin, and it's a bunch of crazy stuff he's got to deal with. This poor guy didn't ask for any of this. But these three nameless women, and they're described as being sisters, they help Shadow and Laura, his wife, after the death of Mr. Wednesday. First by tying Shadow to the great ash tree so he can sit vigil for Mr. Wednesday after he died. And then later they give Laura the waters of time, which helps our poor zombie girl immensely.
Nice.
And they're weird, and it's American Gods, so it's all kind of weird. Nothing's really clear. But I liked that, just as them being like caretakers of the ash tree and being the ones who... And it's really important, like, once Laura's, like, gotten the water of time, she knows exactly, it's like, I know exactly what I need to do to help Shadow. And she does, and she turns the tide of the whole situation for the better for Shadow, because things were going to end pretty poorly for him. And then Shadow, he does have to, like, hold vigil for this, and he does have to go through the experience, and they felicitate his ability to do so. But what I also really liked is while Shadow is tied to the ash tree, he senses Earth, who is the giantess guarding the waters of time beneath the tree.
Nice.
So I liked this element, the incorporation of the Norn as the three, but also this other element of this other Norn figure who is also part of the tree, but is like the giant. And I feel like that captured concepts of the Norn in a way that I thought were specifically very interesting.
Nice.
And that is all I have.
East 10 also had some fun fate stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
A lot of prophecy, kind of. It's weird. There is like the trifecta is what they're called because there's three of them. Let me actually pull up the names.
Yeah.
I think one of them I think is like Yurd.
I feel like East just like pulls names for flavor, but will not commit to consistency.
Oh yeah. So you got Yurd, Loger, and Oder.
Huh.
They're their names weren't at all. They're just a 3-person crew. Yurd being lust, Loger being apathy, and Uther being wrath.
Interesting.
Or no, pride, hubris.
Pride. Interesting combo.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a fellow was born. What the fuck was his name? God damn it. Rollo. This guy named Rollo was born, and he just had immense anger and rage, and he showed up at a throne that was supposed to, like, you know, grant him a wish. And he's like, well, I want everything. But the keeper of the throne's like, that's not what you want. Oh. Who are you? And it sends Rollo into just a spiral.
Oh, no.
For a year.
Crisis.
He goes off to figure something out. And he comes back. And then the keeper of the throne's like, okay, are you ready? He's like, I just want to be a normal human. Ooh. And when he sits on the throne, those three spawn from him, being the negative emotions. And then they were sealed away for 100 years. And then, you know, they start wreaking havoc, and that's the events of the game.
As you do. As you do.
But the fate thing actually comes from Adal meeting Karja for the first time. And when they fight for a second, they're about to walk away, but then they get tied by the thing called the thread of fate.
Classic.
And it's what is the duo mechanic in the game. It's really fun. They can like combo off each other, do really powerful duo moves. Big fan. I thought it felt really clean. Come to find out, spoilers, y'all. It's the mana of Karja's mom.
Whoa.
Who's been like holding them together with her will, you know, and just like you guys need this kind of support right now. So I'm helping you like give feelings back and forth. And it's like a really touching moment when that comes to light. And that's very absolute kino.
It's like, honestly. You need a support system.
Yeah. She comes out right as what is it? Karja turns out to be a descendant from Rollo. And every time she kills one of the trifecta, she absorbs them in order to bring back Rollo, right?
Oh, okay.
And her dad knew this all along, didn't tell her, and was going down to kill her.
Oh, shit.
Because you can't have this motherfucker rolling around again. No, he was trouble. He was bad.
Yeah.
So when the mom revealed herself, I was like, the hell are you doing, dude? This is ridiculous. This is your daughter.
It's not
this is me.
Problem.
What the hell's wrong with you? You know better. Just talk about it. And the guy's like, you're right. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's been a long, you know, struggling.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it service. It's a very touching scene.
I'm sure. No, I'm sure. That's interesting. I like that. Thread of fate. Sometimes it's fate. Well, I mean, fate is literally someone decided this is what's going to happen.
Super good.
Sometimes it's mom mana. I like that.
I'm a big fan of the East series.
Yeah, you are.
If you guys want to check it out, I highly recommend it.
Nice.
Super good.
I like this. I did find, I'm remiss if I didn't mention it. I was trying to figure out if there were and there probably is scholarly writings on the Norse and because sometimes the idea of them having threads or weaving, and that's an element where they're similar to the Greek, but sometimes they don't weave. Sometimes they're more ropes and binding, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's runes, so it is different. I did find a couple sources that theorize that the reason we have those three Norns specifically is kind of an attempt to equate it to the Greek having the three specific goddesses of fate.
Yeah, I definitely believe that.
Simultaneously, three powerful feminine figures doing important stuff is a staple of Western mythology. And why? And the answer is we don't know.
Shit just happens.
It's just, why is it three? Of course it's three. And then it'll just cite three more examples of three. And it's that's not helpful.
It's yeah, but why are those three?
No idea. No idea why is it three. Why is it three Gorgons? Why is it three Furies? Why is it three Fates? Why is it three Norns? What a great question.
Who knows?
Why is it the three Valkyries that Snorri mentioned specifically as being the ones who ride with? Couldn't tell. Well, because it's always three.
It's always three.
But yeah. So I wanted to mention that there is some theory that maybe having the three specifically named Norn is the Nordic belief of the Norn getting folded into concepts and ideas about the the Greek fates.
Yeah.
Because we know Snorri liked to try to anchor it to Troy and the Iliad and things like that. So that's not completely out of pocket, but it is also mentioned in the Völuspá. So I didn't want to not mention that that's a theory and then have folks be but this is a thing. But it did seem of the research I was able and capable of doing, it didn't seem a big thing. There's not a lot of concrete that this is definitely why there's three.
Yeah.
And it is entirely possible that it is
just because it's following the rule of three again.
Because rule of three. Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't need to talk about it. They just do it.
I really liked getting to dive into the Norn and finding how very distinctly different they are. Because I think it is... Sometimes I think we get to do an episode which gives us a lot of like interesting insight into like kind of trying to scrape past the dust and like get to understand the Norse culture as it was better. And we don't have a lot of that. And I think this episode informs a lot of these stories that we've already talked about and will talk about as we wrap up this season in a way that I didn't appreciate before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we have Ragnarok we can see in a different way, especially when we have a concept of like, this is what should happen. And all the things that lead up to Ragnarok is everybody responding to certain things that have already happened, in like Baldur's death being the thing that, of course, we're mad at Loki. Of course, Loki wants to get revenge. Of course, you're going to fight. Of course, you do this because this is what you should do now that this has happened.
Yeah.
And that makes it less of the fates decreed that this is how it'll all end, and more just like, this is the way society is structured. This is the way it ends because this is how you should respond to these things that have happened to you.
Yeah. It's very good.
Yeah.
Big fan. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And it also challenges, I think, sorry, I know we're trying to wrap up, but I'm like, I feel like...
Just got more thoughts.
I just have more thoughts. It just also like challenges the way the Ragnarok and Norse are presented in the Magnus books as being like, this is simply I feel like the Magnus books really interpreted it as being very fatalistic. Like, well, we have to tie Loki back up exactly as he was before because that's what must happen, because that's what will happen in Ragnarok. Whereas I think there is likely room for, because Loki has done this, now we will do this thing. And he will likely still escape in the end, but it's
just different.
It's just different. It's more like we should respond because this is how we are meant to respond. Whereas I think at the end there is a little bit of like, this is kind of silly that y'all are just like, well, one day it'll be this way and that we can't stop it, rather than an acknowledgement of like, this is how we have to save face. This is how we will respond. Like, because Loki escaped, we must punish him. Or I don't know. It is a little bit like, I feel like Rick Riordan portrays Norse, the Nord, Ragnarok, and fate as being fatalistic in a way that I think there was perhaps more wiggle room to examine the nuance of it.
Yeah.
And now I will release this from this episode.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for your patience on this episode being delayed. It's not something I want to make a habit of.
Nope.
You know, it be that way.
It's just sixth season.
Well, I also was depressed. I also fully admit, fully just got
sixth
really
season,
depressed.
guys.
Yes, DJ has pointed out, some of us get seasonal depression and some of us don't.
Nope.
But we will be back in your ears on Tuesday, December 17th to talk about Fenris Wolf.
Woo!
Actually, we'll be back in your ears a week from today as of recording on December the 12th to talk about the first day of Muses.
First day of Muses, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Take care, everybody. And until next time, don't be like Zeus.
Don't be like Zeus.
Muses of Mythology is created and hosted by Darien and DJ Smartt. It's edited by Darien Smartt. The show is produced by Darien and DJ Smartt, as well as
Tim O'Connor, The Crystal Conman, Nicholas Miller. Our music is Athens Festival by Martin Hain, and our cover art is by Audrey Miller. You can find her on Instagram at bombshellnutshellart.
Want more Muses of Mythology? Support the show on Patreon. Just $1 gets you exclusive bonus content. Get more at patreon.com/Muses of Mythology.
You can also support the show by leaving a review at lovethepodcast.com/Muses of Mythology, or tell a friend why you love the show.
Don't forget to check out all of our episodes and episode transcripts at musesofmythology.com.
Thanks for listening.